Welcome to the Harmony Principle podcast. Today, I have my guest Kelly Harris, and again, a false start as usual on YouTube. I never know when I'm actually live, but Kelly Harris is a growth strategist who helps coaches and women-owned businesses build momentum and sales by leading with connection and story. She believes sustainable growth happens when strategy and authenticity work together. And that story is one of the most underused growth tools in business. So happy to have you here with us today, Kelly. Welcome to the Harmony Principle podcast.
Thank you for having me. I am actually so excited to be here.
Yes. And I'm so excited to learn more about your story. And thank you for joining me last minute again. You guys know it's been very interesting these last couple of weeks. We've been, playing around with getting our guests and getting them here and being able to share their wonderful goodness with you. So Kelly did join up with me late yesterday and said, I will be there. And here she is for us to share her genius. And I'd love to hear a bit about your story, Kelly, where you started and how you got to where you are today and helping people with their stories.
Yeah, so what I do is I am a business growth strategist, but if you want to know how we got here, we have to back up about 5 years. And 5 years ago, I was actually a kindergarten teacher. Loved what I was doing, but I always told people the hardest part was the parents, the politics, and the paperwork. And loved to see the kids just eyes light up. However, when the pandemic hit, I went from working about 65 hours a week to about 85 hours a week. So much so that we built a office space for me in the garage. And in October of 2020, my husband came to me and said, like, school's been going for 2.5 months, and the kids only see you for meals and bedtime because you're pretty much living out here in the garage in your office. And so this changes the landscape of education. So hard stop. I know we said you'd only teach for 10 years. This is year 8, but it should count for 3. So like you have 5 months to figure it out. And I was like, okay. And so I started just researching like what could I do? And I came across a course at that time that basically said you don't have to choose between family and finances. And this course taught you how to set up a business and how to basically be a virtual assistant. And so I started with like, oh, I could do data analytics, I could answer emails, like all these things I did as a teacher, and I have a background in graphic design. So like I could do all of these things. And I ended up realizing that I really, really loved writing. And so I started with blogs and, social media management. And over about a year and a half, I realized I landed in email marketing and I realized that I loved it because every email was an opportunity to build a connection. And
Mhm.
so that's what I've done for a really long time. And about a little over a year ago, I realized as much as I loved building connections and building community, it was more than that. What I was doing was one piece of someone's marketing as a whole. And I was never just doing an email or a sales page. It was like, how does this fit into the bigger picture? How does this fit into your story? And so at that time, I started doing a lot of research around story and storytelling and all of these things. And I realized that, like, everybody has a story, everybody has these lived experiences and their perceptions of these lived experiences. And so, if you can harness that and pull out the right stories, that's going to build an instant connection. And so, that's when I kind of started to pivot more into being a growth strategist because ultimately, we're not meant to live life alone. We're supposed to build connections and build community.
Yes, definitely. Building connections and community is so key. And I love the whole concept of pivoting and your husband being like, hey, we need to rethink this and, really putting your family first. That's so very important and vital for a lot of women. They may see that putting their family first means they have to sacrifice something, but it's not necessarily that. It's just finding a way that it all works out for you so that you can do the things you want to do to grow yourself personally and in your business and to take care of and nurture your family. So yeah, I really love that you showed how you could work together to do that. And so when you're helping people like find their stories, what are some things that you do that helps people to kind of narrow in on what the right stories are to tell?
So there's 5 stories we usually start with to try to find. One is like your origin story. like, how did you get here? Like, what's that? Put the stepping stones in place so we can see, so that other people can see that it's possible. Because what I literally help my clients do is like, we're building a bridge with your offers and with your stories so that other people can cross it and work with you and have some of the same results that you're having. In terms of other stories that we pull out, we usually pull out a transformation story. We usually pull out a pivot story, like, what one point I was doing this and then whatever happened and now I'm doing this other thing. Um, and then there's some other things that we pull out, but I think the ultimate goal is finding the right stories for the season that you're in and who you're trying to connect with, because we use story as a mirror, so that other people can see that it is possible.
Ooh, I love that idea of pulling out the right story for the season that you're in. That falls right aligned with what we do with, you know, harmony and rhythms. And the story that you told last week might not be the story you need to tell this week because you may be in a different cycle, a different period of your business. And that's really great that you can help people find that time to pivot and use the right story for the right thing. Um, so yeah, why do you think that there's a lot of business owners that maybe feel stuck when they think that they're doing everything right, but not quite getting results?
Well, there's a couple of things that I usually find are missing. First one is um, the type of marketing that I teach my clients to do is relational marketing. We're building relationships. The reason we're doing this is because I tell people all the time, I learned marketing in the kindergarten classroom. You talk and market different to little people than you do to teachers, than you do to the kids' parents, than you do to admin. Did I know that's what I was doing? Absolutely not. Not at all. Um, but ultimately, I think too that you have to, the relational marketing is we're building relationships, because marketing the way that the world we live in right now with the AI and all of these things, there's something like 10,000 marketing messages thrown at us a day, and our brains just completely ignore 99% of it. The things that our brains are going to remember, they're going to remember story. And the reason they're going to remember story is because our brains are wired for story. The oral language is actually 10 to 20,000 years older than the written language. And if you think about it, like our ancestors long, long ago, that's how they passed down traditions. That's how they passed down history. It was orally and it was through stories. So our brains are wired for that. And when we're building this relationship, you tell a story and people remember that story, they're going to remember you in some capacity. And so when they need what you offer, you become top of mind very, very easily.
Yeah, yeah, I love that learning learning marketing from preschoolers. Do you think that your time as a teacher really helped you with being able to tell stories and find good stories? Or do you think it's just something that kind of built over time?
I think it's a little bit of both. One, I lovingly realize now, like I was always a storyteller. Um, I can remember writing a poem in third grade, and it was fourth or fifth grade that the teacher went back to my mom and said, like, it was published. It was published in a book of an anthology of poems. And I just remember my mom being like so excited and me being like, that poem, like of all the things that I write, like that's the thing. Um, and what I have learned is that being around people and listening is such an important skill for the storytelling, because I remember when I was going to school to learn to teach, one of the best pieces of advice that I ever got was, hey, if you're feeling overwhelmed around little kids, grab a book and sit on the floor and read the story, because that will instantly reset everything. And it's something that I've even done it with high schoolers, or even other adults, like, because it is something that's so unexpected that, and I think people want to grab onto that, like, oh, I remember doing this as a kid. Like, yes. And it shifts a room in such a way that it makes it so easy to say, cool, okay, now we're back to baseline. So now, like, what's the real issue here? What's really going on?
That is so, so beautiful. Yes. Grabbing a book and sitting down will definitely shift a room quickly. And I love that concept about listening being so important as far as storytelling, because the more we listen, the more we can integrate things and grow from them and use them later on. So if you're not a good listener, you maybe have a little hard time at telling stories. So that's a really key thing I think that you brought up there. Are there any tips that maybe you could give people to help them be better listeners so that they could be better storytellers?
So one of the things that I was taught very early on with our oldest, my husband and I went to I don't remember, I can't even tell you how we ended up in it, but it was a 10-week program that basically taught couples relationship skills because they believed that what was best for the baby, if you were pregnant, what was best for the baby is that mom and dad communicate and stay together. And if you couldn't stay together, then you could at least talk to each other. And one of the best tips that they gave us at the time was called speaker listener. So when you're listening to a story, you don't talk, you just listen. And then you turn to the person who was talking, you say, "Okay, so what I heard you say was," and you repeat back the key things because sometimes we get disconnected and our own perceptions and our own stories and our own experiences can make it so that what someone's trying to communicate is not the message that we receive. And so it's very helpful to go, "Cool, what was this what you were trying to say?" And for the other person to go, "Yes, that's what I was trying to say," or "No, you completely completely wrong." But it was one of those things that when you're listening, it is so helpful to just look at the person and to think of a question to ask them to show them that you actually do understand what they're trying to say. So what I heard you say is this, um, because it just helps to build the relationship between two people.
Yeah, great. That's really important is having that feedback that what you're saying is landing and making sure that what you're hearing is correct and that you're understanding it properly. And just as a reminder for everyone that is here, if you're joining us live, please type live in the chat. We are here, we are interactive. We'd love to communicate with you. If you have any questions for Kelly, please also put those in the chat. And if you catch us on the replay, same thing, put replay in the chat. Be an action taker. Go ahead and get involved and leave us some questions, ideas, comments. We'd love to hear from you.
Oh yeah.
So so what are some ways that people can actually share their personal stories without oversharing and actually trauma dumping on people as some of us do?
Well, some of it, so that is a question I actually get a lot. And here's kind of where I take it from. Trauma dumping is when you're like, I'm in the middle of this. I don't know what I'm to do. I need somebody else to share this burden. And you just share all the gory details and you don't actually have a plan. Like you just are trying to get it out. But I always tell people you have to share your story from the other side, or it's trauma dumping. If you're still in the middle of it, that's not a story that you're ready to share. It's you're still going through it, you're still figuring it out. There might be one or two threads that you could pull on out of it, but you have to be very careful to make sure that we have a point. The other thing I do with my clients is I run them through one of my frameworks, which is called the MESS framework. And that stands for moment, emotion, share, and shift. So the moment, what was going on, emotion, how I was feeling about this or this, the share, what changed, what or sure, moment, emotion, shift, and share. So what shifted, what changed in that moment, what perspective changed in that moment, how did I, what was the mini transformation, and then what's the takeaway? What can I share with someone else? And so if you can run that through, that's super helpful to make sure we're not trauma dumping.
Yes, yes, I love that. Especially the concept of being in the middle of it and trying to share. I know a lot of people are really excited when they have gone through something and they can see the light on the other end and like, oh, I know where we're going. I know how we're going to get there. And I want to share it with other people, but they're not quite there yet. And like you said, they're still kind of in that messy middle. So it can get to be a lot of overwhelming emotion. And then it winds up not quite turning out how they expected it to. So the moment, I love that. How do you um, get into the moment of things that maybe are difficult? Are there some key words or phrases or ideas that you usually have people use so that it's not too, what is the word everybody loves to use these days, triggering for others?
So a lot of times what I will do, and I full disclosure, unintentionally did this for a really long time, is when I started my email list. So I started my email list because I was email marketing, and I loved it. but I could not get the data from my clients. It was such a weird thing. They just, like, even when they had successes, they just didn't want to share the data. And so I started my own email list because I was like, I'm going to just have access to this data. So I'm going to have my own email list. And what I started with was like, I have my own email list. I've spent all this money on a CRM. Like, now what? Like we have zero plan after that. And so what we ended up doing, or what I ended up doing, was I have a really good friend who is an entrepreneur. She's essentially my ideal client. Um, and so I started to write to her. And I started to write to Jen and be like, what does Jen need to hear today? Like if we were sitting around having coffee, what would I say to Jen about my business, about stories, about my offers? Like what would I say to Jen? And what I realized was my marketing was literally all around me, often in the form of my children doing something or us doing something and learning. And then um, me after the fact being like, oh, hey, that was a business lesson. Um, I don't know why my camera's doing that, but whatever. It's a business lesson. And so what life or business lesson did my kids just teach me? And so I started telling stories like that. Like if I was sitting around having coffee with Jen, um, what would I tell her? Oh, hey, the kids were doing blah blah blah, and this is what it taught me. And that's kind of how the stories started was, like today I was out and grocery shopping and my 6-year-old had a meltdown and threw herself down and I'm thinking like how often have we been like that as a business owner where we really wanted something and then the answer was no and then we like it was devastating. And then ultimately like it's not really devastating, but we wanted to be the 6-year-old throwing ourselves down because that's not what we wanted. Like, and so what I found was anything could be a story. If you could find a way to build that connection piece and say, here's the takeaway that I saw. Here's the key lesson that I think would help someone else. And I often tell people if one person gets something out of this, then it's worth me doing. If I can move the needle for one person, then I was supposed to be here doing the thing that I am doing.
I love that. I love that. Taking those simple things, those simple little moments in life, everyday kind of things, especially, and being able to turn them into a useful, helpful story for your clients or potential clients, whoever you're working with.
Yeah.
So another question, since you are working with people and helping them to grow their businesses and moving more into growth strategy, what does growth actually look like before it shows up as sales?
So growth actually looks like it can look like a lot of things. And I think that is a piece that a lot of people get lost on because sales are so tangible. Like that's the ultimate goal for everybody is that we're all making money. And at the end of the day, the piece that most people don't realize is that you have to have the awareness before you can make sales. Like people have to know about you before you can sell them things. And there has to be, I know we've talked at nauseam, people talk about know, like, and trust, but it's like, what does that mean? They know who you are, they like your concept, or they feel like we could be friends and actually have a coffee together. And they trust that you're going to get them where they need to be. You're going to get that success for them. For me, since I am a growth strategist, what we look at, and this may be also the teacher in me, but like baseline, what are we looking at right now? I like to look at the vanity metrics. I don't necessarily use them a whole bunch, but like, what is your open rate if you have emails? That's easily manipulated. And so I just want to know, like, what is it telling us? What usually I'm like, do we have a community of some sort? Is that your email list? Do you have a school community? Do you have a Facebook community? Like, what do you have now that we can grow with? And what are those numbers now? Because most of the time, what you're going to see is you're going to see the Facebook group numbers start to grow. You're going to see the email numbers start to grow. The number of people reaching out to you, your DMs are starting to grow, and you're going to have more conversations. All of those things are indicators of growth. Um, all of those things have to happen before the sales happen because they ultimately like we want to see growth in the sales side. And that doesn't happen until the connection pieces happen.
Yeah, that's really great to break down because I know a lot of people when they're looking at marketing and growing their business and things like that, they're like, what's going to be my ROI? What's my ROI? And it's like, well, before you get to that part, you have to do all the other steps in between where you're actually talking with clients and building that know, like, and trust, value, as they say. So also one thing I wanted to ask you about was your heart framework. How does that, would you like to tell us a little bit about that? I know you can't go
Yes.
into depth with it,
Good.
but we
You're
don't have
good.
much enough time.
So the heart framework is actually something I do in depth with my clients, and that is part of a 90-day program that I have. But heart stands for harmony. Um, hold on. My brain just was like, no, you're not gonna you're not gonna talk about that. I'm like, really? Okay. Um, because I've talked
Okay,
about
we do
these things.
that.
No, no, what it's fine. But it stands for harmony. I'm trying to think what the E is. Like my brain is just like, no, it's not happening. Um, I do apologize. Give me just a minute. Like we literally, I don't know if it's just because it's Friday morning and it feels like a Monday, but we, I
That's
am,
okay. I do that with my five healthcare, free healthcare steps sometimes too. I'm like, what's the fifth one? What's the
I know that's almost like, I'm like, I do this and okay. Yeah, there we are. I feel like I had to pull it up because I'm like, we do this. I could do this in my sleep until, it's recording.
Well, someone asks.
Right. So it's harmony. We're going to align your brand's values with your voice to create a seamless, resonant brand experience. Um, and with your mission and your vision, because your vision is your long-term picture of success. Engage. We are going to create compelling marketing content around that harmony, that vision, to grab attention and keep your audience engaged. Authenticity, we have to make sure that we're being authentic and in integrity because people can smell that a mile away. If what you're putting out online is not your true person, people are going to see that. They're going to know, and that's a massive turnoff. That just kills trust if you're not being authentic. And then the R stands for relationships. We are using that storytelling to nurture connections, to build that community, however that looks like, whatever community means for you. And then the T stands for transformation. We are working on conversion oriented copywriting, marketing to basically turn that engagement into tangible business growth.
I love it. I love it. It was worth the wait.
Yeah, it took me a minute because I redid it recently because I was like, it used to be all copy based, and I'm like, I have no idea what it means now.
That's fine. You got it. So I love that harmony. Aligning your brand with your values and your mission. That's really, really important because sometimes people have this idea, but it doesn't quite translate in the stories or the copy that they're sharing. You're like going, what's the
There's a
disconnect? And I think it
disconnect.
also
Yeah,
goes with that authenticity part too. It's like, what are we
right.
doing? So
I
I
was
love that
very,
you're
very
bringing that in.
lucky, unintentionally lucky. Definitely a God thing. But when I started my business in October of 2020, like I told you. My husband and our two older boys were in scouts, and we went to a scout training just to be able to take the kids camping. And at a campfire, somebody said, you got to go to this thing that the scouts offer. And it teaches like a bunch of business type stuff. And it's like a $5,000 training. Like it's totally worth it. And of course, like I just started my business. So baby Kelly was like, ooh, 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 husband, let's go. Let's do it. And he was like, okay. Uh, and so we did it. But basically what this training is it teaches people like, what is the mission? What is your personal mission and vision and goals? And then what are the scouts ones and how can we align it? And how do we bring everything back to the kids, the line of sight back to the kids? And that everything that we're doing, games and everything has a point. Like everything has to have a reason. And so we did that within 6 months of my business. And what I unintentionally did was realize, like, well, okay, what's the mission of my business? What's the vision of my business? What are the goals? Line of sight back to the clients. As everything go back to these people? And so what I realized is most people don't do that. Most people start a business. They're so excited. They want to save and change the world with not a lot of plan, which is lovely. But if we don't have a vision, we don't know what our long-term picture of success looks like, we're not going to be successful because they start moving the goalpost, and that's a whole different problem.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. The scouts and line of sight. That is such a great principle to have and use in your business. And most people are never even what do you call it, introduced to that
Right.
phrase
It's
or
just
that
an awareness
concept
thing
of the
that
line of
that
sight.
yeah, and a lot of people are like, "Oh, my mission is to change the world." Cool. What does that look like? How do we make
Mhm.
this tangible so that we can reverse engineer it so you have action steps that are going to get you where you want to go? If you don't know, you're literally just guessing. I guess I want to make $5,000 this month. I guess I want to work with these people. Like I don't.
Yeah, yeah, definitely just hopium. Throwing some hopium at the wall. And I think I forgot to ask you before we started this call, how long did you have? Hopefully, we're not going to run into a time issue.
Oh no, not at all.
We
We're good.
okay, great, great. So I'm like, I forgot to make sure that she had an hour to chat with me, so I know when to
No,
wrap it
you're
up.
good.
Great. So, um, with your harmony, I mean, your heart framework there was the part where you touched on relationships and community. So, how does that connection and community directly like impact that long-term business growth?
If you can build a community, and it doesn't matter what that community is, if that's your email list, if that is an actual community, which I highly recommend you have some form of like email list and okay, actually, let me back up. When you get to a point where you're ready to have an email list, because that's not a day one thing, um, then it's great to have an email list as a community to because those are people who want to be in your world. They've literally subscribed to be on the list. So there's a lot of things you can do there. In terms of relationships, I love having some form of community, whether that is a Facebook group or a school community or something else, where people can feel like there's a safe place to take risks. It's a safe place to ask questions. Because the long-term growth comes from building that community, growing that community, cultivating that community in such a way that um, when it's a safe place and people are excited because you do like a 5-minute training a week or you give them opportunities to network or connect or co-work or whatever that looks like, as that space starts to grow, you now have a cultivated community in which to test out your offers. And so the business growth is exponential when you're building the community, when you're nurturing that community. It makes it so much easier to continue to grow your business when you have some place that people are super, super excited about. And I'm going to kind of switch gears a tiny bit, but like your email list, there's a couple of thoughts, and this is the little email marketer in me. Your email list, that is a sacred space. We do not ever mess around in our email list because all it takes is once to completely kill trust. If you are doing a joint venture and you're pushing out an offer, you better make sure that it's in integrity with you and your own business, because you're putting your butt on the line and your relationships on the line to say, hey, I like what this person has and I wanted to share it with you. Email has the highest return on investments in terms of if you do it correctly. The last time I looked, I think it was $45 for every dollar that you spend on email marketing. If it's done correctly, you should be getting about a $45 ROI. So it is the highest return on investment, which is why I say it's something to have, but it's also not a newbie thing because it's one more thing that we have to love on. It's one more thing that we have to cultivate. It's one more thing that we have to deal with. And if you're not at a place where you're making a ton of money and you are building that community and you have people who are excited, then it's one more thing for you to do.
Yeah, definitely that it could be just another thing on the list that you're not quite ready for. So if you were to talk to someone that's just getting started out and they want to build community and connection, do you have like a order of operations as far as where you build what part?
So yeah, I do. So if I had somebody who was just starting out and they wanted to build community, I would say, okay, your very first step would be to if you want to build a community as you're growing and you're not ready to have one where you have to like check in all the time, I would start by networking. Networking and starting to create a list for yourself of like, these are people that I can talk to. These are people that this is what they do. These are people I can refer that I are in integrity with what I do so that you're building this small little community of referral partners because referring is reciprocal. When you start referring, or when someone gets on a call with you and says like, "Oh my gosh, I love what you're doing, but like I want brand strategy, but I need a logo first." Cool. I actually know a designer who I would love to recommend to you. And when you do that, what ends up happening is one, usually I've made some sort of little joint venture with this person, like, "Hey, if I recommend you and they buy from you, can I get a 10-15% kickback?" Something like that. So it's reciprocal in that way. But also, if I say, "Hey, go work with Jen, she's a graphic designer and a marketer," Jen's going to turn around and work with this person. And when they're like, "Hey, I really want to grow, but I don't know how," hey, go back to Kelly. Go talk to Kelly. She knows what she's doing. And so it comes back around multiple times. And the more you can do that and build your little referral network, the more you're going to see random emails show up that say, "Hey, such and such referred me to you. I'd love to jump on a call and talk." What's great about that? They're already sold. They're already sold by the time they email you that. Like, "Hey, I want to talk to you." I can sell them. I literally jump on a call. I'm like, "What do you need? Here are the three things that I offer." And almost always those people are like, A, B, or C. Shut up and take my money.
Yeah, yeah, that referral network has to be like an untapped gold mine for so many people that just don't think about doing that part. And I'm like, how do you go into business without, you know, what do you call it? Mingling with your peers,
You have
just
to
like being
know.
at work and not talking to anybody at the water cooler.
Well, and what the other thing that no one tells you when you're starting your own business is that it can be very, very lonely. Like, I work from home and have now for almost 5 years. And what's really interesting is that last year I had someone drop on my Facebook, "Hey, there's an in-person 3-day conference." And it happened to be somebody that I knew her as a kid. Like, we worked together in like my second or third job. And so I was like, "Oh, hey, I know her." And so, sure, I'll go support Corey. And jumped into this conference just completely randomly and realized, did not know it, but realized that my particular area where I live has a booming, and I mean booming, women entrepreneur um, support system. There's like 5 or 6 communities that do community coffee where you can go network with people. They want to go have lunch together. They want to, and so like for 5 years, I've pretty much lived in a bubble. And it's so funny because I go to these things and I talk to these people and I'm building relationships with these people. And what I do is so foreign to them because they're like, "Well, where's your office space?" And I'm like, "Wherever I need it to be." And they're like, what do you, what do you mean?" Like, I'm like, "Well, I have clients all over the world, or I know people all over the world." And they're like, "How?" Because it's a different business model. And it ultimately, it's like, I didn't even know this existed. It's wonderful to have this as support, but nobody tells you that you're going to have to seek it out as a new business owner, whether that is finding people to network with, finding local people who are also entrepreneurs, because this Gen Xers and millennial, like, we're everywhere. There really are people like everywhere starting their own business and doing things. So like you might have to seek it out, and nobody tells you that. That, like you have to make the conscious decision to say, "I want to talk to people. I want to go have coffee. I want to like work from a coffee shop today."
Yeah, and I love that you bring that up, like the different ways that you can do it. Because even today, when I was out, I went to the gym and was coming back home. I'm like, I wish I could just, sit out here and work on my computer. I really should just bring my computer with me when I go to the gym so I can just sit outside and enjoy the fresh air and get some work done. Because it's so nice to be able to have that flexibility to work from wherever, whenever. But also, as someone that's had lots of different businesses throughout my lifetime, starting off with that networking piece that you're talking about in person is what I was used to. And then once I started traveling, I'm like, oh, I don't know how to network with people. I can't do it anymore. And I kind of
Right, like
forgot
a
about it. And there's all these companies and businesses and organizations online that I just never thought of and no one mentioned them.
Right.
Now
And
it's
if
like,
you're
oh wow.
traveling, you might have a really unique opportunity to go to like a community coffee or a networking space in that area. And so there's all kinds of things. The other thing I will warn you about if you're starting a business is be careful with your laptop. And the reason I say that is it was the probably the first 2.5 years of my business. I took it everywhere. I'm talking like my kids' swim meet, my on vacation, dance class. And when you are working on your computer while the other moms are like, those moms that are always like gossiping or whatever, you will be the odd duck out. Like, have your headphones or whatever because they don't understand. This is out of their realm of real, is what we call it in our house. It doesn't exist for them because they've never experienced it. And so be careful and make sure that you have some boundaries around like work time, not work time, like because it will become all consuming if you let it. And more than once my husband was like, you can bring your computer, but you have to play games on it all weekend, or like you're not allowed to be talking to random people and working because you get to the point where you're like you slip into that hustle culture because they tell you that's the expectation, and then you look up and you're like, I have been on my computer for a year and a half working and not actually, we go to the water park and I wasn't actually there. Like, so you have to be really, really cognizant of what you're doing because it's very easy for it to slip through.
Yes, very true. And that's a great segue. Because I wanted to ask you, what does harmony mean to you? And a lot of times people are looking for work-life balance and they're trying to fit everything in and make it work and make it equal. And it just doesn't really feel like that works for most of us. But what does is finding that harmony. And that's kind of what it sounds like you were talking about, not having that computer on all the time, always working,
Well,
finding when to take those breaks.
and I think too for me, so it took a long time to come to terms with it, but like balance doesn't fully exist. So think about when you were a kid or even as an adult, like we try to balance on one leg, we're always shifting our body a little bit to try to maintain that balance. And work is and life is like that. No part is going to ever get 100 or 50%, 100, just 50-50. It's never going to be 50-50 because maybe the kids are sick and they're going to take 75% and we have to kind of back off on the business, or, maybe life happens and I need to focus on the business because I need to bring in more sales because I need to pay for the whatever happened here. And so we're always juggling and moving things back and forth. And really, it comes down to like harmony starts to look like where do I need to focus in this season, in this moment? And not to trauma dump because we've talked a lot about that, but I'm going to give you a real quick little story about what last year actually looked like. In my business. And last year, I had to back significantly off of my business. The reason was, or it started with, we were moving out of the house that we had lived in for 10 years next to my in-laws. But about this time last year, I literally went to my husband and said, we've lived here for 10 years almost, like 9.5 next to your folks. And if you'd like to stay married, we need to be out by October because they're driving me, like we've hit the line, they're driving me back crazy. Um, and so I knew that I told my husband straight up, like, my business has to be the thing that I focus on. Like with the change in our personal life, the only constant in my business is my business. Like that's the only thing that I know 100% is going to be the thing that I need to keep and need to focus on. I don't know if that was like a godsend or what, but it literally became the anchor for last year because we are in the middle of moving. What ended up happening is the people who had owned the house, which were my in-laws, fought us on moving out. They fought it, like we ended up in a temporary situation. They tried to make us stay there. We went to get a rent house. They were actively trying to keep us from moving to keep the control. And it turned into this months-long thing. In the middle of all of that, my mother was at a garage sale. She fell, she broke her pelvis in two places, and she died 6 days later. Super fast. And if that wasn't enough, in the middle of that, like a couple weeks before this all happened, I was talking to someone and I said, I have a whole bunch of emails from the last 2.5, 3 years of my business, and I feel like they are meant for something more. And this person said, stick them into AI and see what it tells you. And so I did, and AI basically came back and said, you need to write a book. And here, your entire business is based around story is the strategy, story is the mirror, and story is the mic to scale. And if you were to write a book, here are chapter title ideas, and here's what email goes with what chapter. And so I was actually writing this book when my mother passed away. So I actually finished writing the book. The whole book came together in about a month. And the entire thing, though, like I told my husband at one point, like everything's on fire in 2025. The only thing that's not on fire is the business. And we're gonna like clutch that. Like it's our God said, it's our lifeline at this point. Because I knew that it was the only thing that in a lot of ways was keeping me sane. There wasn't necessarily harmony but I also knew that like if I didn't have that baseline, that business, something that I could focus on, um, I probably would not have made it out of 2025 intact because it was just like at one point got a therapist and I literally told her like everything's on fire and I've decided that whatever is not on fire on January 1st is the thing I'm supposed to take with me moving forward because at this point it could like bring the marshmallows at this point because I just don't know what else to do. And she was like, it's okay. Like it's gonna be okay. I'm like, I'm just gonna take your word for it because at this point I just like my nervous system is maxed out. I'm just gonna go and share story and share the book and do what I feel like I need to keep doing. And the only reason I share this with you is because right after my mother died, we were unpacking her luggage because my mom and dad had been on a trip. And at the bottom of her luggage was a plaque with a poem that said, Don't quit. Had no tag. We have no, like, my father couldn't tell me where they bought it, if they even bought it, or if it just appeared in the bottom of their bag. But at one point, my sister handed it to me and she said, I feel like mom got this for you. Like, this is meant for you. And so it's something that I keep because every day we make the choice to keep going. And every day we have to decide what harmony and balance look like for that day, for this season that we are in. And sometimes it's not going to be pretty. And sometimes, we show up because our kids need us. And sometimes we show up because we need us. But ultimately, we harmony really looks like A, finding that reason to go on, and B, what needs the most attention or what needs my attention in this season, and how can I make sure that the things that need my attention get my attention in some capacity.
I love that. That's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that with us. And losing your mom, I think 2025 was a dumpster fire for most of us.
A
So
lot of
I hear
a
you.
lot of us.
Bring the marshmallows. Let's just all hang around and sing Kumbaya together. And we're happy to be in 2026 and moving forward. So yeah, definitely. That's a beautiful description of seeing how life goes and how we have to go with that ebb and flow. And sometimes it's a rock song, heavy metal, and sometimes it's a nice, calm classical melody. So,
Yeah.
but finding that harmony is great. Oh my goodness. Um, so another question that I love to ask our guests is what used to be true for you that isn't anymore?
So what used to be true for me was that I was the person that would dumb down or water down my own story and my own experiences to fit in with the people that I was with. And so I would be the peacemaker, not necessarily the perfectionist, but to a certain extent I was. And I would literally dull myself down or be on the wall or whatever because I wanted to make sure that the family stayed together or we weren't having conflict or I was with friends who had bigger everybody had a bigger problem than me And that's not necessarily true for me anymore. Like I, with my own story and with what I want to do and the impact I want to make, I have had to come to terms with the fact that like I'm going to tell my story and I'm going to tell my experiences from my perspective because that's what somebody needs to hear. They don't need the watered down version or the no, let's play nice guys or the peacekeeper. Like they need to see what happens when life falls apart and we find a way to keep moving forward. They need to see what happens when, we've had to go no contact or low contact with several family members. And, my kids will tell you family is crazy important to me. And there are also having to come to terms with, I don't need to keep toxic people in my life just because we're related in some capacity. Like if they want to come to me and have a real conversation, then awesome. But I've had to come to terms with the fact that like I'm going to be a villain in somebody's story. Like some people just need that. They need to have someone to blame for their choices or their perspectives. And if that needs to be me, then it needs to be me. And I'm not going to dole myself out because of that.
I love that one. That is a really good one that especially the way you put it, I'm going to be the villain in somebody's story. Can't help that. Some people just choose to make you the villain even if you've done nothing.
Well,
You
we're
can do
dealing with
absolutely zero things and still be the villain. So
A
letting that
hundred
go
percent. And I
is
mean, like we
amazing.
have a family member that was not like they had a fight with my mom two Thanksgivings ago and never reconciled before she died. And literally like a couple weeks after she died, I was told like, we blame you now. And at first I was devastated. I was like, what do you mean? Like, why can't we just have a conversation and be okay and move forward? And basically I got told like, no, you're like, it's your fault. And I literally had to come to terms with the fact that, like, okay, mom died, she was their villain, and they needed a new one. So, okay. Like,
Yeah,
and it's
definitely.
funny too because like I recently took a part-time job where I'm doing a Mother's Day out so that our youngest gets to go and he gets to go for free. Well, it turns out that the family members that we went no contact with, who I'm the villain in their story, apparently their daughter also goes there. And I didn't know that when I got the job. Like I took the job because I'm an old elementary school teacher and I was like, this is fun and whatever. And literally, I guess this family member called his sister and was like, I think Kelly's stalking our daughter. And I was like, and she called me this morning and she was like, "Did you know?" And I said, "I only knew I said I knew after I got the job." I said, "However, if I met this child, they don't have me in their life. I wouldn't even know this kid." I said, "And I'm so sorry, but that just sounds like so much work." Like I have four children of my own that I stalk because they're mine and I need to make sure they stay alive. Okay. Like I don't have time for this. And she just kind of laughed. But it's just like, really? Okay. If you need a villain, whatever. You go do you.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Just replacing villains, because we need one.
Right.
Everybody
I'm
needs one,
like,
I
whatever.
guess. They say it's better to have something that you fight for than something that you fight against. So I'm going to stick with that. I don't need any villains.
Right. Right. I'm like, if somebody needs you to be the villain in their story, the thing you have to understand is that you are not responsible for other people's perspective of you. Okay. Most of the time, other people's reactions to you is a mirror of themselves. And your reaction to them is a mirror of your own choices and your growth. And some people can't handle that. So, like, you just have to know it and smile and keep moving on. Like,
Exactly as they say, what you say about me says more about you than it does about me. But we could
yeah.
go on and on about that one. But another one, knowing that you are a mom also, and you've got your beautiful family. Another thing that I find really important and really like to touch on sometimes is generational health and just how we pass on what we are doing and modeling for our children. And so it can be as far as what we're physically doing, as far as eating or working out, or just how you handle things, just like you're saying right now, and being able to say those things about, they don't have that as part of their reality, or you're going to
Yeah.
be the villain in somebody's story. So, how do you think that you see generational health? What does that look like to you in your world?
So when I started my business, my oldest at the time was 8 years old. Now he had to be a little bit older than that, but he was in third grade. And he started wearing suits to school, like 2 to 3 days a week. He would wear suits to school and he would tell people, my mom has a business. I'm going to be a business owner like my mom. And he still occasionally will wear suits. But what's really been fascinating, is that two of my four children have their own businesses at this point. One started at lawn care and then he pivoted his business and he actually like builds chatbots and things like that at 15 now because he said, well, mom said it was possible, so it's possible. My one who will be 13 tomorrow, has high functioning autism, and he came to me and he said, Mom, I love to draw. And so we created a Kindle Direct Publishing and did like composition notebooks and things with his art on them so that he had a way to express it and to make money off of it. And what's been really fascinating is we talk a lot in our house about growth mindset, about what's possible. And it's so fascinating because I grew up in a house that was very fixed mindset. You are what you are, you go to college, you get the job, very, I'm the youngest. So my parents were boomers. So there is a little bit of a lot of generational trauma, but there's multiple generations between us. And my parents' perspective has always been, and then my dad will still ask me occasionally, like when I got this Mother's Day out job, he got stupid excited. He was like, "Oh, you're going to go back to teaching then?" And I'm like, "No, no, like, no." Um, but their reality was different than ours because you got the job, you had the job for 30, 40 years, you retired from that one job, you had the house with the white picket fence, like you have a very different experience than what we are seeing. And so we talk in our house a lot about like, how are you feeling? What are these thoughts that are coming up? Like I have paid to go to therapy because with my youngest, who was a little over 2, I would tell you now I had postpartum. Um, I would li like for the first year, I lied to everybody. Like I was like, I'm fine, we're fine, it's fine. This was the year before the year that everything burned down, so we should have probably seen it coming. But I literally went to my husband at one point and said, I need a therapist because I'm hanging by a thread. And what I realized with that was there's a lot of generational trauma, and I'm not willing to pass it on to my kids. And so a lot of times we've gotten in our house where we talk about mental health. We talk about what does it look like to be healthy? Like, should we be going to the gym? Yeah, absolutely. Should we be doing this? Yes, we're not there yet because we're coming out of a really hard season. And like we try really hard to get the kids to all of my kids can cook because we talk a lot about like we're Team Harris, we're team like everybody's important here. Everybody can help. I mean, even the 2-year-old does chores because it's like we're all in this together, guys. And so what does that look like and how can we do this in a way where 6 of us can live in relative harmony? Doesn't always work, but some days are better than others.
I love that. I love Team Harris. Let's go. Go Team Harris. Sharing all of those thoughts and concepts with your children, I think, is really, really important and really crucial for their health and upbringing. And I just find it so lovely when I can talk to people that are kind of on the same vibe. Like, yeah, my kids have businesses, definitely. Why not? I don't know what happened to our society that kids stopped mowing lawns and doing paper routes and having businesses and things before you don't have to wait till you're 18. Why
Well,
is that a thing?
100% is because adults took those jobs. They were needed to, for adults. But the thing is, and this is one of the things I tell my kids all the time, like I would have probably had a business 10 years ago if I'd have thought it was possible. Didn't think it was possible at that time in my life. If you had told me 10 years ago, you're going to have a business, I would have been like, what are you smoking? No, whatever. Uh, and one of the things that I talk about a lot with my own children is they'll be like, oh, mom, I made a mistake, or I didn't do this marketing right, or like this customer yelled at me, or whatever happened. And I'm like, cool. How amazing is it that you learned this lesson at 14? I wish I had learned it at 14. Then we wouldn't be learning it again at 41. Okay. And so we talk a lot about, and sometimes it's really fascinating because my almost 16-year-old loves to talk about marketing. He loves robotics engineering, and it's going to be really interesting to see what he goes and does. But he I will talk to him sometimes. I'll be like, hey, I'm having this issue with the client, or hey, I'm thinking about, like most recently, I said, thinking about going from just being a marketer to being a growth strategist. And he was like, okay, I have a few questions. And yeah, like, well, what does that mean? Is this just word title? Is like, what are you thinking? Okay, whatever. And after about 10 minutes, he was like, okay, see, like that makes sense. And then he just got up and left. And I'm like, okay, thanks. Like,
Oh, I love it. I love it. It sounds a lot like my 14-year-old. He's not so into marketing and things, but he's definitely a part of my business in so many ways because he's like a consultant. He's like my tech guy. He
right,
handles making sure this mic is set up and that my Zoom is working properly. He does all the important things. And he's even an encourager. It was funny the other day, I got dressed and I was ready to go to the gym and I got on my phone for something and I started doom scrolling. And he comes over to me and he puts his hand out like this. And I'm like, okay. So I grab his hand. He pulls me up off the couch. He's like, let's go. I'm like, where are we going? He's like, to the gym. I was like, oh, okay.
oh
Thank you. Thank you
yeah,
for reminding me. That's why I'm dressed this
that's what
way.
I
So
was
I can go
gonna do.
to the
Yeah.
gym. I was mentioning that. So it's great once they can start recycling those things that you've instilled in them and start helping you with them and having those conversations and that motivation. I love that. And so Kelly, before we go, I'd love to know how can people contact you and get into your circle and learn more about how they can get their stories to work for their business and grow their businesses.
Awesome. So there's a couple things. One of the things, if you're thinking like, I don't know what I want to offer, or I'm pivoting and I want a new offer, or I just need eyes on this, I have something called the Story to Sales Sprint, and it's a 14-day, 2 to 3 calls. It's very high touch, but basically we're going to make sure that you know what you offer, who you offer it to, what you're doing, what the positioning looks like, what stories we can pull from your experience around those things. So that's one way that you can work with me. And if you just want to call or you have questions or anything like that, then you can always email me at Kelly with a Y at kellyharriscreative.com. If you want to get on my email list, I have something called Story Sparks, and I shared the link. And what it is 25 story questions to get you thinking. These are the stories that you need to be sharing. And so there are questions for you to journal on or questions for you to pull a story out. It also contains the MESS framework if you want some more support with that. But you can also find me on Facebook and Instagram and LinkedIn. And I also have a YouTube, and we're trying to be a little bit more on that too. So we're working on it.
Awesome, awesome, beautiful. So I'll make sure that we have all of those links in the description for this video here on YouTube and all the ways to connect with you. And so before we go, Kelly, was there anything else that you'd like to share with us? Any other little tidbits or any last words of advice?
I think ultimately one thing that I want people to realize is that like story, while it sounds so easy, one, it's not as easy to do because you want to do the right stories, but what you're creating is you're creating a bridge between attention and action with your story. And so you have to be comfortable enough to share it, but also to realize that you are the guide. The people are looking at you and your lived experiences to see if they can trust you to get them where they want to go. And so, can you build that bridge, and can you get the result that they need you to get for them? And I think ultimately, like harmony is going to look different day to day, and that's okay. And you have to be enough okay with yourself and continuing to grow with who you are meant to be in the next version of yourself to find a way to keep moving forward.
That's beautiful. And with that, I would love to just thank you again for being a guest today on the Harmony Principle podcast. And to all of our viewers, live and replay viewers, thank you so much for spending this time with us. And please make sure you drop any questions or comments you have in the comment section. And we will see you next time on Friday at 9 a.m. Eastern for the Harmony Principle podcast. Have
Bye,
a
y'all.